Hey, it's Anne. Just wanted to give you a heads up on the episodes we have planned so you can get all of your questions in. We have 2 episodes related to parenting. Yes, 2. One about U.S. parenting trends. So, especially anything that's happening right now that you're noticing happening in your Facebook parenting groups, stuff that's happening in schools, what seems weird, what seems like a good shift, anywhere you want to take that. And then the other is about the intersection of technology and parenting. And this is a historical look. It's going to be really interesting. But so anything that you see in your life or that you have noticed in terms of a change in how technology and parenting intersect. We're going to do another on how private equity ruins everything. And I know that sounds kind of outside of our wheelhouse, but we need your questions to give it that special culture study flavor. And then for our continuing series on culture of place, we're going to talk Montana culture with the great Chris Latreille and Texas culture with Texas native Sam Sanders. We're also working on an episode about church camp, and the questions that have come in so far are so juicy. As a former church camper, I have a lot to talk about. I cannot wait. Finally, we're tossing around the idea of a Katy Perry episode, but we need really good questions to make this one work. So let us know if you have thoughts there. As always, you can submit your questions for episodes and for the Ask Anne Anything segment at tinyurl.com/culturestudypod. Okay, thanks, and on with the show. This is the Culture Study Podcast, and I'm Anne Helen Peterson.
And I'm Tova Danovich, the author of the book Under the Henfluence. I'm a freelance journalist, and I also run the Substack A Little Detour.
Can we start by talking about your chickens and how you got into them?
Yeah. So I think it was 2018 I got chickens. I left New York to move to Portland, Oregon, and it was the top of my list. I remember sitting on the subway with friends, and they were like, what are you most excited about for Portland? And I'm like, I have the names of my chickens picked out already. But then it took a few years to get to that point. And sadly, I don't have chickens right now because I got divorced and I live in an apartment, and they are not good for apartments, as it turns out.
I know, this is the hard thing, right? And especially if you've written a book about having chickens and you're like, and now because of my life changes, I no longer have chickens. I totally understand this and feel it, but also in some ways, I think it gives you some objectivity when thinking about chickens. You're like, if I have them again, I need to choose my choice. It won't just be a lineage of chickens.
A free-for-all of chickens. Though my chickens, it took me so long to find them the perfect home because, of course, I love them. So they are happily ensconced at a B&B where they get kitchen scraps every day and arguably might be more spoiled than when they live with me. So I've visited them a few times, and the people who run it are very sweet. And they're like, if you ever want your chickens back. So we'll see. But home buying as a single woman is, a whole thing.
When I asked for questions broadly related to this push towards growing chickens, why is the government pushing growing chickens? You suggested that we could talk so expansively about this. Chickens is a gateway to talking about much larger ideas as well. But I also think we got a lot of questions that are who's buying chickens? If you live in a city, you can't have chickens. And it really depends.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about the laws about owning chickens and how they vary municipality by municipality?
Yeah, they do vary. So, check your zoning codes. It was funny when I moved to my old house and was first looking into getting chickens. I looked up the zoning laws, of course, because I'm like, how many chickens can I have? And the area where I lived, which was just outside of Portland, the zoning code was up to 50 chickens. And I actually called the zoning guy because I was like, this is a typo, right? This is an insane number of chickens. And he's like, no, they haven't changed the rules yet. So still no roosters, but up to 50 chickens, which is common. Almost every urban area, you might be able to have, 3 to 50 chickens, but no roosters because of the noise problem, which it presents difficulties.
Right. And on the island where I live, a lot of people have chickens, but then there are different community associations that have rules against them, I think because of noise. It's always been that's been interesting to me. And then like the city of Bellingham, there are a couple places in town where you'll just be walking around, and there are free range chickens.
Yeah. They're everywhere. I mean,
just like chickens on the street.
I saw
just
them
hanging
in Brooklyn when I lived there. In front of a brownstone in someone's little yard, they'd have like the tiny chicken coop and a couple little hens and having a nice time in Brooklyn.
This isn't chicken, but in my brownstone no, it was not a brownstone, and it was not mine. In my apartment that was near many brownstones in Carroll Gardens.
Slightly different.
The landlord's girlfriend was living in an illegal basement apartment, and also she had the rights to the backyard of this building. And she, from what I can tell, was growing illegal bunnies for eating. But like, just like, there are lots of things that happen on and off the books, legally and illegally. And like, so I think that that's something to consider too. Like sometimes just because it's not,
because it's not legal doesn't mean people are
doing it.
I mean, I said I can't have chickens because I'm in an apartment now, but a couple years ago, my first foray into the Substack universe, I did a chicken newsletter, and for one of the pieces, I wrote about people who keep chickens in their apartments because they wanted to have chickens and didn't have the space, and they have chicken diapers. It's a whole thing. I was like, I don't think my chickens want that from me. I don't know that I want that. But it's a choice. You can make it. I mean, I did bring my chickens inside sometimes for, like, we had the wildfire smoke here in Oregon, the temperature. So I have gone through weeks of chickens living in the basement, and don't recommend. Not great.
Strong not recommend.
No.
Also, you don't have to own in order to have chickens. It just depends on your landlord.
Correct.
Being chill with your chickens or not knowing about your chickens.
Yeah, exactly.
So the number of U.S. households that have their own chickens has doubled since 2018. Apparently, between 11 and 12 million households now have chickens. So what is your thesis about why this happened? It's not just a bunch of yous moving to Portland to get chickens. Like, there's something broader going on.
No, that would be wild. It's actually just everyone in Portland. Maybe. But yeah, there was this big push. If you go back far enough, a lot of people start it with Martha Stewart's first book, Entertaining, because she loves chickens. She has all these very fancy chickens, and she photographed them beautifully and all the colored eggs. So that was kind of the beginning after a long time of, chickens not being around. But it really
or being something that like farmers and poor people had.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, we can do chickens, but fancy, amazing.
Right.
So that was kind of a little bit of a beginning. And then, we have the whole slow food Michael Pollan, fast food nation, where people got very concerned about both how animals were being treated, how far away your food has to come from. All of these things, and that, the know your farmer, know your food situation. So a lot of people got into just their own food growing generally. And I think that, for me, was very much where my interest kind of started from. I don't like gardening and growing my food. People love it. And I'm like, this is not a thing that brings me joy.
Well, and
There's
also
so much
it's
canning.
like, it's also, as someone who used to be a vegetable gardener, the only crop, at least where we lived, that was like any sort of, I don't know, worth the time and effort that I spent plugging into the vegetable garden was zucchini. Everything else, and basil, maybe. Everything else, I'm like, I should just buy a carrot at the store or at the farmer's market from professionals. The other thing that I think about is that with like that push towards more local consumption and getting something like eggs from your local farmer, I think there was a little bit of a revelation that those eggs do taste different.
Yeah, I definitely notice a difference in texture.
Yes.
And I have had this in particular, like, I think you're not going to notice it if you're going to the grocery store and buying the most expensive eggs that you can find there. Like, there is not a big difference if your hens are raised on pasture. I think that's the biggest differentiator. But when I go to those hotel buffets and they have the like weird scrambled egg and you're like, is this water with egg in it? What's happening? I think you really do notice it in those very cheapest, super mass-produced
I
eggs.
love that you talk about this, that it's something you only have at hotels. I'm like, oh, from when I buy cheap eggs or like when I was a graduate student and I always was like, cheapest eggs, those are for me.
Like, I remember. Yeah.
But they taste very, and then I would go home and my mom used to have chickens and like have a fried egg from a chicken from your backyard. Like it tastes like a different product. It's almost to me, and I know this is not a one-to-one.
They're creamy.
Yeah, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it's like skim milk versus like half and half.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's not just the taste. I mean, when I did have my chickens, there was just this extra delight and whimsy of, they all had the different colored eggs. And I'd be like, I'm eating Peggy's egg today. Yeah. I'll do one Peggy's egg and one like tiny Emmylou egg. What a fun treat. Mix and match, which we all need some whimsy.
Yeah. And like you go and you gather them and all, like there is like this like a hobbyist component. And I just today published this newsletter about the joys of hobbies. And like, this is, it's a hobby like any other. And I think once hobbies become much more visible, then it's also easier to be like, I'm going to go do that thing.
Yeah. And I think, maybe you have had this experience, but as a writer, I'm incapable of having a hobby that doesn't turn into work in some way, such as writing a book about chickens.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's so many other components of this that I want to talk about, particularly in like this moment and where the growth of backyard chickens intersects with a lot of different like discourses that are floating around. So we're going to get to some of the questions that I think will allow us to talk about that. So first question comes from Becky and Melody's going to read it.
How is this wave of faddish micro homesteading different from past waves? There have been so many, often overlapping, from Depression survival gardens to victory gardens, to back to the landers, to climate crisis preparation, to mini secession/independence movements, to Obama-era slow food Michael Pollan, solve problems with farmers markets, social status trends. From the 70s on, distrust of government and industry has always been part of homesteading waves. Is this just the Christian nationalism version? All the decades of distrust and fear channeled for patriarchy? A backyard flock to QAnon pipeline? Is it personal privatization of federal government systems? Is it all influencer driven, all aesthetics, appearing to arise utterly without context?
Amazing question,
what a
Becky.
Question. Yeah.
Like, it just covers it all. I love our listeners. They so often like answer their own questions with their question because they're so smart, right? And they're asking us to talk more about some of the ideas that they have put forth in their incredible questions. So I know you have thoughts on this. What do you think?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's so much in that question that I could go to. And there definitely have been differences in movements. I would say the end of the question where it's like, is this influencer driven? I think yes, especially right now. It is so hard to take away the influence of social media from what we want to do, what we are exposed to, like how we think about doing it. And it was very interesting when I had my chickens, I kind of accidentally also became a chicken influencer. The account is still there, but it's like it still has 130,000 followers. And I have not had chickens for a year. But it was really fascinating the different types of people who keep chickens. And you have people like me where it's like, I'm going to have my really cute coop and my fancy chickens and they're really just pets and this is my fun hobby. You do have the homesteaders. You have a lot of like more religious people getting into it. I think chickens are fascinating because they attract such a wide range of people for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
But within that, I think it is getting a little bit more and more insular in these different realms. And this writer Kirsten Lee Nelson. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name right, but she was a fellow chicken influencer I knew. She's a writer. She did this great piece for The Guardian within the last month about how she was a homesteader and for many reasons decided to stop. Some of those is that it is really hard. Like she could never go on vacation, which is very true. If you know any farmers, I have farm family in North Dakota. All the weddings are around New Year's in North Dakota. It is not a time you want to go there, but that's when people are free from farming obligations. And she also said that, you know, she did a lot of posting on social media, and the comments on her posts, especially in the last few years, have kind of been, I started following you because I thought you were like me because you're doing this homesteading, but you are liberal. How dare you?
Right.
Which is a shift. And I don't know how big that shift is.
No, and I think that you're seeing the splintering for sure. It reminds me actually of some splintering that I'm seeing in the dahlia growing community. You wouldn't expect this to happen, but it's around progressive politics, obviously, but it's about like some growers who are gay and who post about like, oh, the flowers brought me joy today when like things are hard, right? Like just stuff that people would post in a group that then leads to these larger discussions and then leads to a splinter group of people who are like, this is a place where we can talk about these things. And so you get these gradual like, okay, we're the dahlia group that like is affirming and liberal, and we're the dahlia group that's more like tariffs are good is a current fissure in the group as well. And I can see that happening in chickens too. It's like, oh, we're like the Christian nationalist chicken people.
Yeah, and it's funny because I mean, when you said that, the thing that comes to mind is many years ago, my grandma's church had a splintering because one part wanted there to be a female pastor and the others were like, no.
Just Lutherans.
Lutherans, exactly.
I mean,
very,
many
very
different
Scandinavian German.
Well, and like something like that can illuminate larger ideological fissures within the group.
Which is interesting because, you know, we feel like this is all new because it's on social media and it's things like our Dahlia groups. But, you know, we don't, like fewer Americans are taking part in these community bringing us together things like church. So it's like maybe this is just the human impulse that anywhere we go, we make these communities and then we splinter when we disagree with them.
You know, there's part of Becky's question that really struck me. She said, distrust of government and industry has always been part of homesteading waves. And it really, like, that seems to be a kernel of, like, the motivation on both ends of the ideological spectrum.
Yes.
Right? Like, part of my desire to get chickens, do not have chickens, but to get them is that, okay, I'm thinking about the fallout from an earthquake and a tsunami. Like, I want to have a food source on the island that isn't just me like begging other people with chickens for their chickens, right? Like I want to be part of the larger collaborative movement, right? And that comes from a distrust that the government will be able to respond and take care of me during a moment of national climate crisis. And just like general prepper impulses that the collapse of society is maybe coming, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a big thing in the Pacific Northwest also. Yeah. One of my friends, Emma, her novel Tilt just came out, which is about like what happens after the big one.
No, don't. I can't read it.
Don't read it, except you. But yeah, one of the things she's talked about so much is that in, you know, the research she did for this book about like how people deal with catastrophe, that community is the way to get through it and like getting to know your neighbors. And it is interesting because there's this divide between the like bunker prepper of like, what do I need for my family? I'm going to hide underground. I have all these secret resources that I'm hoarding. And then there's I live in an apartment. I should get to know my neighbors better. And I should have like a meetup point with my friends and also get water that I still don't have in my apartment. But, you know, like these are the things that will really help us is knowing each other and who to look for. And there is something more beautiful in that to me, where it's an outward reaching instead of I'm scared, so I'm going inward.
Right. Or like, I'm like, okay, so I have friends on the island who do have chickens and maybe they will share their eggs with me. But what's the thing that I can offer in our post-apocalyptic collaborative scenario? That's what I want to be thinking about. Like, am I going to have more of the water tanks? Like, am I going to have the bleach pills? Like, I want to think about these things.
What can I bring to the table in this team?
Today's episode is sponsored by Ollie. So my dog Beverly, she's 2 years old. And we're going to talk about her later in the show, what a psycho hoseby she can be. But she loves food. But I thought I knew how much she liked food. But then we started giving her Ollie, and then I really understood how much she liked food. I think she understood, like, because it comes in these frozen packets, like, and they don't smell like anything, right? Because they're frozen. She understood, like, me opening up the freezer, like the sound of it. She's like, oh, that's the good stuff. Like, that's how excited. Like, she loves this food so much. She especially likes the one that's like turkey blueberry. There's all these different recipes that sound like things that I would actually eat. And here's the thing. Since Beverly started eating Ollie, I mean, she's always a happy pup, but she is like even happier around meal times. And her beautiful, luscious black coat is even shinier. And she has better poops, like smaller poops. This is super notable because when I'm out walking, I'm walking 2 dogs. If you get both dogs poop twice, here you are with like a bouquet of poop bags. It's really something. So when they have smaller poops, it's great. So here's how it works. You go to the website and you fill out this 30-second quiz, and they'll create a customized meal plan based on your pup's weight, activity level, and other health info. They send you your first box, which has 2 weeks worth of meals, and then this very cute little storage container and a guide of how to gradually switch your dogs over to their new diet. Ollie is also the only fresh dog food that comes with unlimited routine health screenings, so you can get your pup on track to living their healthiest, happiest life. Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Head to ollie.com/culture, tell them about your dog, and use code CULTURE to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/culture and enter code CULTURE to get 60% off your first box. Culture Study is sponsored by OneSkin. So I'm very much a face routine person. Even when I don't shower in the morning, I always do my various serums and lotions, because sometimes I wake up and I'm at the age now where I feel like all of the water has been sapped out of my face. So I go in and I put on the under eye cream and I'm like, oh, already it's working magic. It's restoring plumpness to my face. I hate that word, but that is what I'm talking about. I'm just is adding all of the moisture to my dried out desert of skin and then adding the moisturizer as well. I started using these, and oftentimes when you start using a new product, you have to ease yourself into it. You see if it is reactive or anything like that. They are so gentle. They just feel really good on the face. So here's the thing about OneSkin. They use this proprietary OS1 peptide, which is the first ingredient proven to switch off the damaged senescent cells that cause lines, wrinkles, and thin, crepey skin, aka what's going on underneath my eyes. Founded and led by an all-woman team of skin longevity scientists, OneSkin's products are backed by extensive lab and clinical data to validate their efficacy and safety on all skin types. Their products also prove that you don't need a complicated routine. You don't need 17 serums in order to achieve healthier skin. And you know what? I get a lot of people who ask in the culture study advice who are around our age who are I've never really had a skincare routine. What should I do? I would actually say that this is a great starting point. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using code CULTURE at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code CULTURE. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. Give your skin the scientifically proven gentle care it deserves with OneSkin. Okay, our next question, a little bit of a hard pivot. It's very practical, but we will return to these ideas that we've just discussed. This is always one of the first ones that comes up when we're talking about this. So let's hear from Caitlin.
For backyard hens, what's the actual cost savings? How much are the upfront and maintenance costs versus free eggs?
There is not, is kind of generally the rule. I've written a couple of pieces about this in the last few months, and we've just so economies of scaled the egg industry that even our prices right now, like, what was it, $4 something when they were at their high in January. In the 1940s, like adjusted for inflation, eggs were something like $7 a dozen. There just is no way on a small scale that you can replicate the intense cost savings of industrialized egg production. Right. And yeah, so there is that. That said, I think if you're looking at like, I maybe don't want to stuff my chickens into a windowless barn and all these other things that go along with that. Like, I think there is a kindness and environmental thing that you can look at that makes the cost even out a little. But, you know, a chicken coop that is actually predator proof, especially with costs of lumber, I'm like, even if you do it for yourself, probably $500 to actually fit your chickens inside of it. Yeah. And then there's feed, there's all the other stuff that goes along with it. It takes most hens, you know, 6-ish months to reach laying age. So you're raising a chicken kind of for free, quote unquote, until that time. When I had chickens, you know, I gave a bunch of eggs away to neighbors who sometimes were like, can we pay you for the eggs? And I was just like, anything that I charge you is going to feel like I'm so undercharging you. It will then make me grumpy. Right. So I'd rather just give them away.
Be part of the gift economy instead of trying to like.
Exactly. And then they gave me like tomatoes and peppers. So it worked out really well.
Yeah. It makes me think too about even like economies of scale when we're thinking about medium-sized operations or like small, medium operations. So on the island, one of my friends runs this farm that is like a local farm that lots of people, tourists, residents, like get flower shares from and get lettuce from, all sorts of great things. And it's on a bunch of land. And part of the reason that it's easy for her to maintain her flock is because she can move. She has one of those trailers that you can move the flock around, right? Pretty readily. Yeah. And then it's just kind of low maintenance the rest of the year. So like you invest in the hens and then like it's not thinking, you're not only thinking about, okay, how much does this chicken cost? How much, like how much money am I getting from this? What sort of things do I need to invest in? It's kind of just integrated into the rest of the operation of the farm. And she charges, I think, $6 for half a dozen eggs, which always was like, oh, wow, those are quote unquote expensive eggs. But at least here, if you go to Trader Joe's or even Fred Meyer, they're oftentimes, even recently, sold out of the cheapest type of eggs. So you only have the more expensive and pasture-raised type of eggs, which are the same cost as what she is selling.
Yeah, exactly.
I would rather give money into my hyper-local economy, like my neighbor up the street, for the same cost as paying Fred Meyer.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's so interesting because the way that we raise animals generally, but I think you really see it in chickens, has just changed so much with the specialization of these breeds. Like back, my grandma and great grandma growing up, they were like on farms. So my great grandma raised chickens for egg money, which was huge. Right. Like all rural farm women did it. It's
like their version of pin money, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Except it would pay for like everything. Yeah. And we kind of looked at it as like, they're not really working, but it's like 80% of household expenses were covered by chickens. But these are all dual purpose chickens. So, you know, you have the hens where they lay the eggs, and then when they're too old, they're stew. If you have, you know, male chickens, they just immediately go into dinner and you can sell all of them. But at that time, you know, a hen would raise maybe lay 150 eggs a year. Now, the industrial hens, they have 300 eggs a year. But they cost more to slaughter than their meat is worth because broiler chickens, their own special thing, they reach market weight in 2 months. Like they grow so fast, you actually can't keep them alive if you wanted to.
Because their breasts get too big, right?
Yeah, their hearts kind of explode.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And that is why it's so cheap. Like we think of it as expensive, but it's like it is a lot cheaper than it used to be.
Yeah.
And that also makes it impossible on a money scale to do it yourself more cheaply.
Right. And that's such an interesting thing that like we're always like, why would you do this thing if it actually costs more? Mm-hmm. And I think some of it is that we're trained to think of, oh, if you're doing something as a hobby, like it should also be a cost saver in some way, right? Like, you're knitting your own clothes when actually like knitting a sweater is, you are losing so much money, but you're knitting your own sweater. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think also, sweaters, as has been well reported, they're garbage now. So you're knitting your own sweater and you're getting an amazing sweater where if you got that same quality sweater, would be so much more money.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not a one-to-one comparison. But yes, if you are going into chickens with the sole purpose of, I want cheap eggs, this is not a good idea. Don't do it.
Okay, so our next question is from Shauna, and it'll allow us to get a little bit more into the question of why the government is participating in the chicken conversation.
I recently attended a lecture on antimicrobial resistance, and one of the presenters reported that the majority of 2024 salmonella outbreaks here in North Carolina were due to backyard poultry. Backyard chickens can also be a source of avian flu, it turns out. I'm very intrigued by the intersection of MAHA, anti-vaccine, pro-tradwife-style home farming beliefs, and the real-life danger of transmissible disease outbreaks caused by keeping animals. How do you see this potential issue playing out?
Oh, and just like add raw milk into like this whole conversation. First of all, shout out to Shauna attending a lecture on antimicrobial resistance and talking to us about it. So one of the reasons you reached out to us about doing this episode is that the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, went on Fox and Friends weekends at the beginning of March to talk about bird flu. And before we answer Shauna's question, let's hear the last bit of this conversation between Rollins and Rachel Campos Duffy, who is married to Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy.
Well, I have chickens in my backyard. Sean started that. Yes. And yesterday I went out. They just started laying. And yesterday I got 5 eggs. I guess my question, if you could make it just really quick because I'm out of time, is part of the solution more small farms? Because when avian flu hits and you have these giant industrial farms and these chickens, which I don't think the eggs are as good anyway, is part of it just investing in smaller farms, encouraging that?
I think the silver lining in all of this is how do we, in our backyards, we've got chickens too in our backyard, how do we solve for something like this? And people are sort of looking around thinking, wow, well, maybe I could get a chicken in my backyard. And it's awesome. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think everyone who isn't a farmer right now wants to be. So you're in the right department, Brooke.
I am. What a blessing. Thank you.
Okay, so what struck you about this conversation?
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, it's not an awesome solution to any of this. And it is just wild to me that the agriculture secretary would say that because anyone with knowledge of how agriculture and our agricultural economy works would not think that would be a great solution to, again, prices of eggs and availability.
Or just like containing the spread of avian flu. Like
yes. Yeah, I know.
Just wrong-headed on so many fronts. Like,
Yes. And it was really interesting. This question makes me think of this was back like pre-pandemic starting. So I think like 2019, but there was this Newcastle outbreak in California, which is another disease that kills chickens. It was very transmissible. And I did a couple articles about it. And they initially were like, we need to quarantine these chickens, like stop moving your chickens around. It's spreading the disease of these chickens. It hadn't hit the California egg industry, but that's obviously what they were really worried about because they have a huge egg industry in California. And the backyard people were like, I'm moving my chickens if I want to. You can't stop me. And there were conspiracy theories that came out about it. Where people were like, the government is doing this to keep backyard chicken keepers from producing our own food. Like there is no disease.
Right.
it was just kind of wild. And I hadn't thought about it in a while, but looking back, I'm like, this feels indicative of a lot of human behaviors we've seen in the last
Right. It's
5
this
years.
whole understanding that like government regulation is actually here to control you instead of to keep you safe.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Or vaccines are a means of control instead of a means of like saving people's lives.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, do you see other impulses at work here? Like, I think that it strikes me as like this idea that if you do it yourself, then somehow you are immune to societal pathogens.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I did know because it's not how I think about things.
Right.
And there's so much stuff that, like, for a while, backyard chicken keepers, you could just get antibiotics for anything from like farm supply stores. And they shut down on that because of all the antibiotic resistance that we are seeing, which is largely from these like very large scale farms, but obviously plays out in small farms too. And a lot of backyard chicken people, judging by groups, they get fish antibiotics on eBay and give those to their chickens when they think they need them, which is not a good idea. Don't do that. Again, like you don't know if your chickens need them. Yeah, it's wild. And like the CDC has put out kind of funny press releases where they're like, don't kiss and snuggle your chickens because you're getting salmonella from them. And it's like that is true. There is a risk of salmonella. Like wash your hands if you're around farm animals. A lot of people don't.
They're like, you know where this egg comes from, right? Like the egg doesn't, like the chicken doesn't barf up the egg.
Yeah. Yeah. But, we make a lot of choices about that.
Yeah.
Like the reason our eggs are refrigerated in this country is because we have decided to wash them rather than do a lot of things on the farm level that would keep salmonella levels down and things like that. So we're like, we're going to let farms be kind of as dirty as we want them to be, but we're going to wash the eggs really, really well, which takes off this protective antimicrobial layer on the egg, which is why you have to keep them refrigerated. Other countries are like, maybe the farm should just have clean conditions for the hens, and then the eggs will be relatively clean, and so you can have them on the shelves because they still have this bloom on them.
Well, and it goes back to this idea that anything that is government mandated is actually potentially unsafe. Mm-hmm. This is the whole like, I'm doing my own research strain, where it's like if you come to that conclusion yourself from the science, even if you're not a trained scientist, then you are in the right? Like if you make your individual decisions, it is your liberty to make your individual decisions because you have come to your own thinking about what is right for chickens.
Yeah.
Or for how to inoculate children, or for how we should be drinking our milk.
Yes.
And I think that really all connects to this larger distrust in institutions that has been brewing for a very long time, and I think is spiking right now.
Yeah, for sure. And it is so interesting to me that you get kind of the liberal version of distrust and the conservative version of distrust, and they come from very different places. Like I think the conspiracies are different, but their solutions kind of wind up like you go far enough and you meet back in the middle of the circle.
And you meet at raw milk. Like that's where
I know. And not vaccinating your children. As someone, I grew up going to Waldorf school, so I'm like very familiar with that. We had a whooping cough outbreak in my school when I was growing up.
Really?
Yeah. And I have this great memoir that my like great grandma wrote that's just like only the family has it. And it's probably my favorite family thing. But she writes all these funny stories, but she also has a story about one of her like many siblings, but her baby brother died of whooping cough as a child, and like how heartbroken the family was over that. And it was just devastating for everyone. And it was maybe 5 to 10 years before the vaccine for that came out. And I just like can't help thinking about what she would think looking around if like you have this chance to stop this from happening and you don't.
Well, and this is where like cultural memory, I think, comes into play when you do not have the memory of people dying from these diseases that we inoculate against. Mm-hmm. And we also do not have the personal, at least in America, the personal memory of like negotiating widespread outbreaks from something like salmonella, or like the threat every day in your life that a foodborne illness could kill your entire family.
Yeah.
And the risk has decreased so much because of government regulation, but the regulation has been too effective almost.
Yeah, I know. I think it's funny that, I mean, in the scheme of human history, looking at when we discovered germs existed to when we kind of stopped them with antibiotics to some extent, it's like that crossover happened really quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not super surprising that we're like, yeah, what's the problem? Go to the hospital. It's fine.
Today's episode is brought to you by Blue Land. The other day, I was doing a not entire house cleaning because it is my rule that when you invite people over, that your house does not have to look spotless. Because if you try to make your house look spotless for when people come over, then you won't invite people over. So I was trying to practice what I preach and just do like the giant number of nose smushes off of the window that leads out to the outside.
Dog nose smushes, I assume. Unless Charlie's like pressing his face up to the window.
Dog nose smushes off the window. So I was doing a little bit of that. I was doing a little bit of surface cleaning because it's not always the cleanest. I'm not a super clean person. So that's why I like something that is actually very effective when you use it. And that doesn't make me feel like I'm inside like badchemicalsfactory.com and like just like inhaling it straight into my lungs. So I was using all of these new Blue Land products that we got, which are super cute. They come in like very aesthetically pleasing bottles and are great for the environment, not only because of what's in the spray, which is much less toxic than the stuff that you usually get, but also because they come in these little tablets that you put into the bottle and then add water. And that means that when you need more of it, you just get more of the little tablets instead of buying an entirely new plastic container. So instead, I used Blue Land, and that's what I used before I had people over. I loved it. It didn't leave that like smell that makes it smell like, oh, this person just sprayed like chemical cleanser all over their bathroom because they knew I was coming over in an hour. It was great. They are independently tested to perform alongside all of those major brands that leave those big smells and are free from dyes, bleach, and harsh chemicals. They are currently trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. Right now, you can celebrate Earth Month and make the switch over to Blue Land products. You can get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/culture. You don't want to miss this. blueland.com/culture for 15% off. That's blueland.com/culture to get 15% off. Okay, so I want to drill down a little bit more on like the subject of MAHA, which is Make America Healthy Again. It's part of Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s larger plan for America. So this question comes from Elizabeth, and Melody's going to read it.
I don't know if the government wanting us to have our own chickens, which, by the way, is a huge bird flu risk factor, is about MAHA. It strikes me that it must be because it feels like glamorizing something that, when one actually remembers the past, wasn't actually healthy or fancy or pleasantly earthy unless you were Marie Antoinette collecting the pre-wiped eggs. My dad grew up in poor rural Kansas working with chickens, and he described it as dirty, messy, gross, and necessary, not sexy. Based on his account and my own experiences in foreign countries when chickens and roosters woke me up at all hours, I've never wanted them, though we love eggs in our farm share. My boomer parents are rapidly aging, and a handful in their cohort have recently died. I have felt grasping toward them and their memories as some of the last people who grew up in truly rural America. How do we preserve and elevate their memories so that we aren't just left with fake MAHA versions? This feels particularly important given the way the current administration seems to want to erase the past.
Yeah, like how do we remember how gross it can be?
Yeah, I know. I'm imagining that like viral milkmaid dress just going out to collect your eggs in the morning with all your cleavage. Yeah.
I just think like the stories that were passed down to me were just of like endless toil.
Yeah. Yeah. That is also what I grew up hearing about. I mean, a lot of fun too.
Yeah,
and I think
for
that's
sure.
that is the thing, is we kind of glamorize, I think, the communal aspects of it, perhaps too. Like I think of all the work, and then I also think of like the barn dances that my great grandparents hosted. I'm like, that sounds great. I do want a barn dance.
Yeah, no, I know. You're like, oh, everyone coming together for the harvest, like
amazing.
But yeah, I don't know, like that tension, right? Like we don't want to romanticize it, because romanticizing this past allows us to reject the things that have led us to the present. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
But then also we don't want to like make it look like a hellscape either, because it wasn't, right? It was just a different way of living. It was a harder way of living. And I think sometimes we have to remember that like technological advancement has made a lot of things easier. Like our daily life is easier in many ways.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, you know, thinking again of like this memoir that I have from my great grandma, because it really puts the highs and the lows into this context versus what we see on social media, which is where a lot of the best kind of propaganda for like the homesteading lifestyle has happened. Where you just see the like beautiful dress while you're collecting your eggs and your like perfectly coiffed children in their little like matching plaid shirts. And I think it is hard to forget about the things like you can't go on vacation unless you have a farm manager, which like only the wealthiest people are going to have farms that big. And even some of them like don't, because that's not really a job that exists so much anymore. You know, cattle come at inconvenient times, like your crops fail, like all of these things that come along with it. And I think we just look at, you know, this supposedly like return to simple gender roles and nothing was hard, which of course it was for many people. Like there have been people that did not fit in those roles this whole time and had to just do that anyway.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it is this erasure of the reality of what people's personal lives were like, what their hopes were that they didn't get to achieve because they weren't allowed to. And so I think a lot of these things are lovely, and there can be something really lovely in gardening, in like raising chickens, who I still think are delightful, but like, do I want that to be my only option? No, I don't.
Right. And this gets to like so many questions about choice feminism and like, how dare you degrade these women who want to do that? And it's like, well, the difference is that they believe that women should only do this.
Yeah.
They don't want there to be choice, right? Like they want this to be something that you just do because of like your chromosomes. It reminds me of like almost like a pinhole camera. Like we like look when we look back on the past, like this tendency to romanticize when we're dissatisfied with some component of the present. Like the way that young Gen Z and Gen Alpha romanticize the 90s, the millennial culture is so fascinating to me, because they're like, oh my God, they didn't have phones. Like incredible.
I mean, I kind of romanticize that too.
Totally. And like that is real. And that yearning for that component of that like pre-technological moment is like, that expresses more about our dissatisfaction with our current moment than anything else. And I think sometimes we forget though that like also in the 90s, like people were bullied in my high school for being gay. There are all sorts of incredibly regressive components of that moment too that are decontextualized from we didn't have phones and we just drove around a lot.
Yeah. Which of course is the thing again where, you know, maybe I'm guilty of a version of the same thing, though I of course feel like I'm right in it when I'm like, oh, but there was community and people like kind of knew their neighbors, and like, how can I bring those things into my modern day? Not that I want to like go back to everything else, but to be like, there were some really beautiful things about that connection. I mean, I personally do think it's really important that we know facts about animals we raise for food.
Yeah.
I talk about this in my book, but I went to a wedding and all the people were like, I would really love a pet cow because you can just get milk whenever you want. And I was like, that's not how that works. And they argued with me about it. And I was like, I have been an agriculture journalist for like 10 years at this point. Like, I know about cows. They have to be pregnant to produce milk. This is a basic biological fact. And they Googled it before they believed me. And these are all like college educated,
Right.
very smart people. And so I do think it's important to reconnect to some extent from these things that we really take for granted. But does that mean we all have to move back to the land and don traditional gender roles to do it? I don't think so.
Great tee up for our last question. This comes from Emma.
Does my interest in things like chickens and gardening for my own fruits and vegetables mean that I've fallen for propaganda? I love the feeling of being more connected to the earth and my food and the seasons, but given the price of things like eggs and food in general, it also calls to mind World War II victory gardens.
Okay, so I just love this idea of like growing chickens as propaganda or homesteading in this moment as propaganda. I think right now we're getting it a little bit from the government, but that's because the government has intersected with Christian nationalism so effectively, right? And I think this is also maybe a time, like Melody just put this in the show notes. She was like, obviously we should also talk about like race and who is actually doing the labor of producing the vast majority of our food items right now, and where this, like what this romanticism is actually about, right? Like the dirty stuff is done by people who we devalue in our society. So it is oftentimes performed by people of color, immigrants, undocumented people, et cetera, et cetera.
When I think about that, I think about once we industrialized, which did have this interesting switch from, you know, women used to be the ones that raised the chickens. And then post-war, the USDA stepped in and they're like, let's have men do it.
Right.
We'll move it into these big sheds. And then who are the ones working in those sheds? That is going to be people of color, immigrants, which is continuing today, you know, who's slaughtering all of the chickens, those same people. So I think you see it more there, where when we extracted all the resources possible out of the animals, we then move to what resources can we extract from people, and which people do we want to extract those from?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that to think about is like people who are raising chickens like having a garden was a thing that poor people did, right? Either you were a poor person who had it for yourself on your small patch of land, or you were a poor person who worked for a richer person and you tended their vegetable garden and you tended their chickens. And who was the available labor, right? Who were the poor people in a certain area? And sometimes it was all white people, and sometimes it was like white poors and also black poor people, and sometimes it was other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one funny, very behind the scenes, but just because this is related to backyard chickens, is most of them, like, they come through the mail from a hatchery. Like, even if you're buying them from a farm store, they were mailed to that farm store from a hatchery. And if you want chickens, especially if you are in one of these urban areas where you can't have roosters, you are buying them sexed, which is very difficult because chickens don't have external genitalia. It's only a job you can do when they are first born, like within the first 24 hours. And so in my book, I went to visit a hatchery and I watched the chicken sexers doing it, who are all immigrants of color, you know, doing these jobs. Incredibly hard, really hard to find people to do this work where you look at tiny chicken cloacas for 7+ hours every day and try to figure out if there's like a little bump in them or not is the difference. So it's like, yes, you do have these lovely pet chickens that are so picturesque, but to get your hens, you're relying on these people in these very dark rooms with like one spotlight lamp, like holding tiny chicks and doing this work all of the time. So yeah, there is no way to get around exploitation in this country with anything if you look far enough.
So does it feel like propaganda to you? Does liking to do this stuff feel like falling for propaganda? How do you untangle a lot of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think liking it within the confines of, you know, your life, where hopefully you have other like freedoms and flexibility and are able to follow other, you know, whatever role you want in society. Like, I think no, if the only way you think you can do it is to marry someone and move to the middle of nowhere in the country and become a trad wife. Like, perhaps you have fallen for the propaganda in that case.
Yeah.
So there are certainly degrees. Yeah, it's always hard when you like something that there is a component of people who like it who just don't like them at all.
Totally. You're like, oh, what does this indicate about me? And like, I think that this is where you can point more to, you know, what we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, where there are so many different things that direct us to chickens, right? So like, it can be distrust of the government for whatever reason. It can be like environmental anxiety or prepping for whatever reason. Like there are things like different motivators that lead us to a common practice. I even think something like religious faith. Like there are a lot of different things that make people believers, right? Or there are a lot of different things that make people interested in wearing makeup.
Yeah.
And it's more important to parse what is the thing that is making you interested in it.
Yeah. And sometimes it's so hard to parse. I mean, I think about this all the time. Am I doing this because I see everyone else doing it? Do I actually like it? It's kind of like no one wore white sneakers. And then one day I was like, I should get some white sneakers.
Right.
That seems great. I love how this looks.
Or it was like sock length, right?
Yeah.
Like I resisted ankle length socks for so long. And now I'm like, those calf socks are so dorky. And I'm like,
and I got them. I got the stupid new socks. I'm like, this is so dumb, but I needed new socks. And I was like, fine. It now feels like it looks better.
Right.
We are very social. That is kind of how we work, is we look around and we're like, this feels comfortable to me. Like chickens feel comfortable. And I think like, it's fine to be weird social animals that fall for trends, as long as it is not like harming you or the people around you.
Or you're making everyone else do the thing that you're doing.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Like not everyone should get chickens, but like they're great. They make wonderful pets. They do lay eggs. I think there is certainly a lot to recommend them. And
they should be regulated. They should be regulated, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like they will not solve our larger problems. Like that's another thing, is that like a lot of individual actions, or the way that we are encouraged to think of our individual actions as solving systemic problems. Like
chickens as self-care.
Yes, right? Yeah. Like chickens can be a hobby, but that doesn't mean that they're solving the larger problem of unregulated bird flu, you know?
No. Yeah. And I mean, a big thing with backyard chickens, you know, at the beginning of the episode, you kind of had the statistic about vaguely how many households are keeping them, but we really don't know. Like there have not been good surveys on it for a number of years. So we don't know if it's spiking and going back down, what's happening. You know, you take your dogs and cats to the vet, and then when there is an outbreak of a disease in your area, people have a way to contact you. And extension offices and agricultural offices, they have really not put a lot of effort into something like that. So even with something like bird flu, the amount of work that chicken groups on Facebook have had to do to say, this is what biosecurity looks like. And, you know, if you are keeping chickens by a lake, like don't, because bird flu is being spread by wild birds, and like, that is how you get it. You know, there are all of these precautions that you can take that do make it much safer for you, for the community, for the likelihood of transmission cross species. And people just don't know, because we think of everything in this free-for-all way.
Or like exceptionalism. Like, well, if I keep my chickens by the lake, they're not going to get the flu, right?
I know. And it's heartbreaking. I mean, I know of people who have had their flocks euthanized because of bird flu. And yeah, especially if your chickens are pets. Like imagine someone came to your house and they're like, sorry, all your pets have to be killed right in front of you because they have this disease. And like, obviously that is the right choice, but it's not fun to watch this happen with like men in hazmat suits in your yard. And yeah, it's not good.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, is that where we're going to end? Is on hazmat suits in our backyards?
I know. I was like, ugh. I feel like I start with like happy things about chickens, and then I'm like, here's how they're treated in industry. I'm always a bummer at the end of the interview. People just need to cut me off at some point. But yeah, I think it's really fascinating. And I think that chickens can be lovely, and they have been unfairly swept up in all of this as a representation of all of these things. And yet it's also kind of fascinating that they are so intertwined with our lives that like throughout history they are representative of bigger issues at play in society.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to find more of you on the internet or not on the internet, just like want more of you, where can they find you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm here in Portland. Don't come to my house, but
buy your book. I was trying to reference like books.
Buy my book. It is for sale. Literally my first name, it's Tove, but if you even just Google Tova chickens, like you will find me on the internet. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Substack. You can buy my book in whatever form you like to get your books. It's at the library. It is a love letter to chickens, despite what this conversation might make you think. I feel like chickens aren't thought about enough as animals. And so I like to encourage that because we have this really long, fascinating history together as two species sharing a world. And I think that's lovely.
Amazing. Thank you again. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. Today, paid subscribers got an Ask Anne Anything segment all about how I deal with my 2-year-old dog, Beverly. If you want to support the show and get that bonus content, head to culturestudypod.substack.com. It's $5 a month or $50 a year, and you'll get ad-free episodes, an exclusive advice time segment, and weekly discussion threads for each episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts because we have so many great episodes in the works, and I promise you don't want to miss any of them. If you want to suggest a topic, ask a question about the culture that surrounds you, or submit a question for our subscriber-only advice time segment, go to our Google form at tinyurl.com/culturestudypod or check the show notes for a link. The Culture Study Podcast is produced by me, Anne Helen Peterson, and Melody Rowell. Our music is by Poddington Bear. You can find me on Instagram at Anne Helen Peterson, Melody at Melodious47, and the show at Culture Study Pod.